Well, those of you who might have heard me speak about these Bosnian recordings know that I'm by no means expert in traditional formats, so I'm so happy that I have all of you to learn from, and I constantly ask questions more or less stupid or uninformed or pedestrian. But my primary interest is research of old music and where to find old music, but on old recordings. So if you hear a cracking, you call, Will, you call some people like that and ask, what is this? So I had some earlier presentations, so some of you might have heard them about similar subjects. So I see this as some kind of a continuation of this project, and hopefully soon I'll write a proper bigger paper about a set of these problems and issues. So let me first briefly take you through the history of recording of traditional Bosnian music, and just a tiny detail which is crucial. I'll be talking about so-called urbane music, music from the cities. I won't be talking about like Highlanders, polyphony, and similar styles. First, one of the most important researchers of Balkan music, and especially Bosnian music, is Risto Pekapena, and in his work I found and we're good friends, and I'm really grateful for all the things he did, and I'll be pointing out to his research in several points in this presentation. He discovered that the first mention of any kind of phonograph or recording in Bosnia was in 1890, July of 1890, where Sarajevo Gazette or Sarajevo daily newspaper published an information that a certain Mr. Castle from the Edison Phonograph Company exhibited Edison's electric phonograph run by battery-powered electric motor. So we don't know, he probably never recorded anything, but if somebody heard about Mr. Clark or knows anything about it or knows that he has like a bunch of cylinders sitting somewhere, I would love to know. And it took, of course, some more time before first Bosnians appear actually were recorded. The first one is this guy here. He's the one on the left. His name was Mustafa Suđuka, and so far as we know, he's the first Bosnian ever recorded. He was a clarinet player, a really prominent one at the end of 19th, beginning of 20th century, and he was recorded in 1900 at the famous international exhibition in Paris by Leon Azulay. We talked about it in earlier conferences, and we even have some plans to maybe dig around that even more. So I would just like to show you how his playing sounded. He's playing a famous at the time, very prominent military march, Jazair. So it's just a solo clarinet. So just as an example, like the beginning of things. So as you know, this recording was just discovered within the Europeana project, EU project, where they got a lot of recordings from European countries, and that's how I found it. And actually it points out to the fact that this was completely forgotten. Nobody in Bosnia knew about this guy. Even until today, very few people know that there was a clarinet player. Why is it important? I'll tell you later. First of all, there were other recordings that were completely forgotten. Not forgotten, but nobody actually in the wider public in Bosnia ever knew that it was recorded. So basically they couldn't have had an effect on posterior tradition, on performers that were coming up. And I think, as in many traditions, recordings can be separated into commercial recordings and field recordings. Field recordings being all the recordings that were done for the sake of research, documentation, by chance sometimes, and they were hidden in the archives, and some of them are coming to light only in recent years, and persistent fellows like myself are trying to see what it is and what kind of influence can it we could have from it for the future. But commercial recordings are really interesting, and I'll tell you more about it. Some of those performers, like we saw in earlier presentations, are simply completely forgotten. Some of them kind of became influential. It depended on the prominence, of course, and the time of when it was recorded. Field recordings, as I said, were mostly unknown to wider audiences. So usually it was, scholars who knew about it, if that. So these commercial recordings, we can separate them into 3 waves. And this is some kind of this is my first attempt at conceptualization of these things and in terms of their influence on posterior musical traditions of Bosnian traditional musicians. First wave came before the First World War. The second one is between 2 world wars, and the third one is already modern labels, radio archives, professional performers who are kind of still regarded as huge stars in Bosnia and in the region of former Yugoslavia. Those field recordings, among others, the most important were Matija Murko, then Milman Perry and Albert Lord. So we had some heavyweights coming. Albert Lord again came because in this first exhibition he was just an assistant to Milman Perry, but in the 50s he came by himself and did additional recordings. Very important Yugoslavian ethnomusicologist Cvjetko Richtman. He started his research and recording from beginning of 50s onwards, and Vlado Milošević, composer and ethnomusicologist, did the same. I'll come back to this, these divisions and conceptualizations. Let me first try to explore these 3 waves. The first one was Gramophone Company, and we talked a lot about it, and it's mostly familiar. Also, Risto-Pekka Pehranen was the one who did a lot about these recordings. I was really happy to had this very generous grant from Prince Claus Foundation from Netherlands in 2015, and I was able to make a huge exhibition in Bosnia, in Sarajevo, and for the sake of this exhibition, I asked EMI Archives here in the UK to digitize some, I can't remember, was it like 50 or 60 sites, and they were exhibited in Sarajevo in 2015. And this was one of actually the main catalog from one merchant from Belgrade who was trading those zonophone and gramophone records. Let me play one of those records. It was sung by this guy, whose name was Suleiman Abdagic Siri. Very interesting person, but I won't go too much into that. And I'll tell you why is this recording important. This song, Zapjevala Bulbul Ptica, is today commonly known among Bosnians, but also people in the Balkans as Zapjevala Sojka Ptica, or also Zapjevala Bulbul Ptica, but with a completely different melody. It's in 7/8, probably a bit more southern influence from southern Serbia or Macedonia. Zapjevala bulbul ptica, or zapjevala sojka ptica, misli zora je. And an interesting thing is when I played this old recording to some like contemporary wider audience, people who are not musicologists, musicians, but you know, they love music and they go to concert audience. And most of them told me, but that's not the right song. It's the wrong song. You know, because they knew the lyrics, but the melody and the way style of performance was completely different. And it struck me also, I'm being an artist and doing my own arrangements, I had a lot of that. You know, sometimes I would steal an arrangement from an old Saz player in the 30s, and people say, it's like, oh my God, that's jazzifying our tradition. You know, and vice versa. I would write something of my own and my own lyrics, and they would say, oh, that's a true tradition. So it's all about notions we have about tradition. One of the most important one is that familiarity is a central value in folk music. You know, because that's your mother's voice, her songs, your grandfather, father, your aunts singing, or songs that yet you learned in the neighborhood while you were growing up. And whatever comes that's different, somehow, you know, provokes you, makes you uncomfortable. And that is in so many instances what old discography does. It often brings us it brings in front of us what is forgotten, something that we are no longer familiar with. You know, there's this, it's as if we are alienating our own tradition, and as if, you know, we cannot recognize, we think we know. And it's usually in any national tradition, especially when nationalism kicked in. In national tradition, this is our song, my forefathers sang this song, and and then you find the recording and you realize, well, no, actually, it's completely different to what you know. Yeah, and that's why I think there's a reason there why it's so hard for these old recordings to penetrate wider contemporary audiences and to make them interested in that. You know, because when I did this exhibition in Sarajevo in 2015, I was thinking, you know, people would come in waves to listen to these old recordings. Everything will be explained, how tradition changed. At some, you know, on some instances for better, on some other for worse. But actually, people were like, "Oh, what's this? This some crazy squeaky voices," you know. I also somebody mentioned. I think it was one of the lectures on Zoom that they wished that they worked on those files a little bit so that people could hear very melodies and not a lot of crackings. I did that. I was aware of that, and I was like, you know, but that didn't help. People just felt like, this is not our music, you know, this is, I don't know, this or that, you know, especially in regions like Bosnia and the Balkans, where there's a lot of ethnic nationalism, recent wars, dissolution of Yugoslavia, you know all the things. So second wave of commercial recordings, and most of these first performers at the beginning of the 20th century were like that. Their versions there are a couple of versions that survived, a lot of lyrics survived, but a lot of melodies and singing styles did not survive, you know. But these performers from between Second World Wars, they are closer, you know. As Fatima said, you know, this generation of our mothers and fathers and our grandfathers, they mentioned 30 artists from 40s and 30s. They still kind of, there is this generational remembrance of that. But earlier, no. And those styles, you know, kind of creeped into contemporary tradition without even people knowing. So this is just an example. She was a huge star in the 30s from Bosnia, from Bijeljina. Sofka Nikolić was tremendously successful in forming the Kingdom of Yugoslavia between two world wars. Her singing style, and she plays this frame drum. And you can find this on YouTube if you're interested. In 80s, one famous Saz duo, we call them, sazlijski duo, of Behka i Ljuca, Behka Topčić and Igva Ljuca. They were seen as the oldest of Bosnian tradition. You know, they were singing old songs before others corrupted our music, you know, typical stuff. But what they were doing, of course, they had a lot of old songs, so don't get me wrong, but they had some parts of repertoire that was actually from the 30s, and they played the same song in their own style. This is a private studio, low production, but you can also find this in YouTube if you're interested. So the thing is, when I started researching and playing this music, I started meeting all these old musicians, and I was thinking, oh, okay, if they're playing saz, then that's the older tradition. If they're playing accordion, that's a newer tradition, because that's how we were taught. You know, in musicology, at the musicology courses, what came first, what came the second, what's ours, what's import from foreign, blah, blah, blah. And a lot of that is actually not, a lot of those developments are not going like this, they're going like this, constantly. You know, people are learning from records and stuff like that. Third wave, I won't be talking much about third wave of recordings because that's Radio Sarajevo, a famous label during socialist times, big stars of that music. Check out Hymns of Polovina, he looks like Jeremy Brett. Remember Jeremy Brett, who played famous Sherlock Holmes, my favorite. Anyway, so they were a huge star, sold millions of records, played stadiums in socialist Yugoslavia. And my question was, how much did field recordings, so not commercial recordings, but field recordings, influence their performing styles? And I asked some of them who were still alive. I was lucky enough to meet some of them and interview them, actually quite a lot of them, and musicians around them. Actually, not at all. Very infrequently were they presented with a field recording, like this is an old granny singing this song that you're about to record tomorrow. No, they were either heard it somewhere in cafes. They also heard it on old records, like popular records. But sometimes they just had an ethnomusicologist take it down in notation, and the ethnomusicologist would sing like a, you know, like the like basis of the melody, and then the singer himself or herself will try to do it in a style of contemporary traditional music in 50s, 60s, 70s. You know, even sometimes these transcriptions were really basic, you know. And at the end, for the end of this presentation, before we open for questions, and I would like actually to congratulate Tinja how well did she put this conference together, because I just see how there's so many themes in common, even though, you know, at first sight we are coming from completely different places, so kudos. I would like to play you two recordings from Milman Perry archive. Both are marked as BL13, which is Bartok Lord 13. It was taken in village Rotimlja, close to Stolac, on December 15, 1934, and the singer is Naza Rokic. My idea is that I myself as a performer, so not only as a researcher and ethnomusicologist, but also as a performer, because I was first performer and that then became a researcher for the sake of, I wanted to know, you know, I wanted to have more melodies, more interesting things. And this is just an example how those field recordings, usually on cylinders, but some of them also on discs, can help us understand this tradition. This tradition, due to transcriptions that were re-importing this music into radio and popular music context, were somehow, you know, all even out. As Mr. Edwards said, you know, they were to the measure. Singers needed to start at a particular point. But this freedom of tradition, I'll play you this recording.
Vidite čuda prije ne viđeste, gdje proleće jato golubova. Iznad bijela kajta zova dvora.
So how she sings it, if you transcribe it, you don't get to sense how she performs it. She performs it, she has a concrete rhythmic measure. She's like 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 3 1 2. And then she stops to take in air. Pay attention. So first time she doesn't do that. It's 13/8. But she makes these breaks in terms of her natural breathing. She doesn't have an accompaniment. She's telling a story. She uses, and I'll finish there, just another tool of this singing trade, of this poetry. It's a completely different song. When she finishes this song, there's a long pause and being recorded on the cylinders. So they are wasting cylinders. Duncan or Alex would be really frustrated by this, but Milman Perry, coming from Oxford, having a lot of money, you know, so they could have afforded that. But some great things happening there. She tells the name of the song. It's a big song, she says. She says, shall I sing it? And instantly goes into it. Like... So on the same melody, she continues with a completely new song. For her, it's a new song. She doesn't, as if she doesn't have a consciousness that it's the same melody. She doesn't care. She does it a little bit slower in these same rhythmical shapes. Again, does the, you know, take breathing, but then she does something that forever changed my relationship with traditional singing. You know, these mostly literate people who do artistically great, beautiful things. This time she changes measure. It's like 14/8 now.
Kad su bili vlasi na granici, svakog dođe dijela i robina, starog bana dvoje djece malo. Sin se Muhammedovi zao materi nije sisa.
She does what people in Asia, like in India, do with raga. She completely goes out of the measure because she's telling a story. For me as a singer, this is a much more important information. If I listen to her performance, like a longer chunk of performance, and again, Milman Perry is one of rare ones who recorded longer songs and not only first stanza, first melostropha, as they call it. So I try to tell you about this, you know, earlier reflections of these recordings back to tradition, but the last example I gave you is more like I'm coming out of my ethnomusicology shoes and I'm coming into my performer's shoes. This is something I learned from. I take down these phrases, I work on it. Sometimes I work in workshops with people on it, how to do it, you know, how to tell a story with all these means. And yeah, that's about that. I hope I didn't waste too much time.